going to teach you how to make or construct a table that might be in your classroom, or it's a high kind of workbench that has a couple of bars here. I might put another kind of frame up the top here, but this is my starting point or references. So we're going to take tabletop with the corners rounded off, and then we've got these 40 by 40 millimeter bars that make up the middle frame of the table. So we're going to get started on the tabletop first, and we're going to create a 700 millimeter by 1400 millimeter rectangle. So I'm just going to kind of get my own starting point, but you can start somewhere to the right of your XYZ axis. So you just want to get your kind of rectangle sitting on the right, in the right direction, and then you're going to type in. Just give yourself a nice skinny one so you can kind of see that you're going to have to put in the shorter measurement first, which is 700, and then 1400, and then you click enter or your return key on your keyboard. So I haven't done a second click, I've only clicked once with my mouse. Oh, I lost my measurements. Let me put them in again because I was demonstrating. Here we go, click entered. So the next stage is we want to figure out how big these, the radius of these arcs are. So the most helpful thing for me to do is measure with the tape measure. So you can find it on this toolbar here, or you can click T. So if I use spacebar to go back to my arrow, if I click T, I can get back to that. So it is 80 millimeters. So I just take the tape measure in the direction that I want to mark out, and then I type in 80, click return, and I've got a little marker there. Okay, so I want to do the same in the other direction, just in case. Actually, no, I'm not going to. I'm going to go from that marker, 80. So I've got now the center of the circle that I'm going to draw. Then I'm going to get this tool here, the one that draws a little pie shape. Oh no, I'm not. This one, the from point. So I'm going to get the center of the circle here. This is the radius of the circle, and then I can mark it out that it draws 90 degrees of that circle. So that's pretty handy. Now I want to do that all the way along. Note that I'm using my navigation tools, O for orbit, or O for orbit, and H for my hand. T for tape measure. I'm going to measure in, actually, I'm going to take that measurement all the way across, and then I'm going to measure in 80. Cool, then I can go back to my arc, center, go out to the edge, draw out my 90 degrees. So what's going to happen here is then I can select, dragging from right up to my left corner of the screen, over those different items, the surface and these two edges, to delete them. And we're going to go across to this other side. So what I could do is I could go from this midpoint and I could measure 80. It's snapping to my original drawing, but you would have to type in 80, and then I could measure off 80 this way, probably 2, and then measure in 80 this way, and I've got my little markers. Get my tool to draw my arc. Only 1/4 circle. So I'm checking that 90 degree down in the corner just to confirm that I'm only drawing what I need. Dragging up from the right to the left, a little window to select. I don't need this anymore, so I'm going to delete it. just to keep my model tidy, move down here, delete these markers as well. Okay, cool. We have our tabletop that is paper thin. So if we go in here, we see that the tabletop's 20 millimeters thick. Okay, so we want to do that as well. So I'm going to use the push-pull tool. It's over here on the toolbar, but I use the P. I extend up or down, depending on what you're planning to do. I'm going to go down, I think, because I have, so I've just dragged or moved my mouse in that direction. I haven't got my mouse clicked, the button held down, so it is released, and then I'm going to type in and click enter again. So that is completed that part there. What I'm going to do now is group all of that. Make a group, because I don't want anything removed from that. I don't want it to stick to anything else, so it's its own little group. Once surfaces or lines attach to one another and I move them, everything that's touching it moves as well. So if it's a group, that doesn't happen. Now we're going to move on to the leg frame. So as we can see, the frame is 40 by 40 millimeters, like thick. So I kind of want to start with that. But another helpful element is I've decided on the space between. You can see it's 1200 millimeters by 600. So that's just the space that it's going to have and sitting underneath this tabletop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark that out first as my little guide. So again, drawing the rectangle in that direction, you can see with the measurements that it kind of gives me an indication that the narrow edge, my 600, needs to be typed first. Cool. And then from these corners, I can draw my little 40 by 40. 40, 40, enter. I'm going to push-pull at 800 millimeters up. 800. And now that is a leg that I want to duplicate. I don't need to draw anymore. So I'm dragging my mouse all the way over. If your view has things behind it, so let me demonstrate by changing my view a little bit and doing that selection again. If I do it like this, anything behind it within that selection window is going to be selected as well. So it's likely that the bottom of that little leg over there could be selected if they are not. They are grouped. They're like a component. Okay, so just be aware that when you're selecting things, you need to have a clear space behind, or you need to make sure that everything behind it is like grouped or a component so that you're not going to accidentally select that as well. So in order to copy this, firstly I want to make it a component because I'm going to have multiple of them. Leg, press enter, and then I'm going to click move, which is over here, or click M, and then I'm going to click option, and I can choose which corner, and I'm going to move it to where I want it to. So I can choose this guy. Again, I can click option, I'm going to choose this corner and move it over to there. So it's quite methodical in terms of wanting to think about where you're moving it to and how you want it to align. So I want this corner here on the right to connect to that corner there. So I'm making sure that I'm choosing the right connection point. So if I don't click the option tool, it doesn't allow me, I just clicked it now, it doesn't copy it, it's just going to move the original. So make sure you click the option. That option or instruction is actually at the bottom of my screen here. Click to place the items you're copying. To enter a distance, option is to move, command is to toggle auto fold, and the arrow keys allow you to kind of move it around. Okay, so there's lots of kind of information on the screen that's coming up to you when you're moving your mouse around, so kind of interact with it and be aware of it. So we've got our legs. Now we want to make this little bar here that helps give some structure. So we've got a 160 millimeter gap. So that would be helpful to kind of know about and mark out before you draw. So we're going to use a tape measure. We're going to measure up 160, mark that off. Then I can use my rectangle tool, which is R, and I'm going to go 40 by 40 and click enter. So now I've got my placement for my pole, my bar, and I'm going to rotate around so that I can see where I want it to go before I finish that tool. So I'm going to go back to the push-pull tool. You see that I'm still in the mode of doing that, and I don't have to write in 600 millimeters, even though I know it's going to be. I can just drag it to that point where I get some indication that it's touching an edge. Okay, so then the next step is to select all of that object. I'm going to go back to, oh, I think I deselected it. Here we go. Let's get to a better locale viewpoint. So I'm using my selection tool that everything inside, if I go bottom, top left to bottom right, it's going to be anything inside that window that I've just drawn is going to be selected. So all of that bar is selected. Make a component. I'm going to call it the frame, because I think I already happen to have named the bar over here that. And I'm going to copy it. So remember the process of it being, I'm just trying to get my viewpoint so that when I start to move it, I know that I'm wanting it to connect up over here. So when I put in a tape measure going across here, I've got a little guide. This edge here is where my new one of these is going to move to. So I'm going to click move, option, take this corner, and that corner is going to go to here. Cool. So we've copied, we've made that chair, that table so far. I'm going to delete this little guide here if I double click it, because I don't need that anymore. And I'm also going to copy this and put it at the top as well of the frame. So I'm going to click move, option, take it to the top, and option again, take that to that frame there. Awesome. And we can make one more that's going to stretch the length of the table and give it even more structure and form. So go back to rectangle. Now you've got lots of guides. You might not even have to use measurements, because you've got enough indication. Oh, let's zoom in so that we can get that going in the right place. Here we go. Cool. I'm going to look up, get a little bit more straight. So navigation is a really important part to your process of creating on this program. If you don't get your navigation down, then you can kind of find yourself struggling. Now note, I didn't make a component but I could still copy and move all those different elements. Just in terms of speed of this video, I don't necessarily have to get all of those elements as components, but the cool thing about components is that if I edit and make one of these legs shorter, for example, I could click scale, make them shorter, and then surely all of them should do that, but it didn't happen that time, so I don't know what's happened there. I do go over that in another video. So the next step is to move this so that it is centered on that. So the easiest thing for me to do is get my tape measure, find the middle of this, mark out that center line. Oh, we might do it with a line just so that it's definitely there. And then I'm wanting the same, essentially the same the other way. So I've got a cross on my tabletop. And I'm going to do the same with my frame so that the cross is happening on here too. So I'm going to draw a line, midpoint to midpoint, midpoint to midpoint. And so that point there, that intersection there, I'm going to want that to connect to this part of the table. So we're going to look upside down for a minute. I am going to see if I can rotate around. This gets a little challenging. Now you decide on how it's most helpful for you to connect in and see all this on your own screen when you're making this. But I'm going to get my table top and I'm going to move it. I'm going to get into a more 3D perspective for a second, and I'm going to click M, and hopefully actually I might have to just move it upwards first. Maybe I'm going to have to just move it up vertically, so once it snaps to the blue scale, rotate back around so they're much closer to each other in terms of a plane, and it's behind it, snap, and then we can see, we can see that it is sitting pretty even on the table. So now I can select these lines and delete them because they're not helping us anymore. Cool, so there you are, you've made a table. Oh, look at that. Cool. So thanks for following along with this video. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about moving objects, making a larger, more complex kind of form or product by lots of different components.